A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. The taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems is in dispute. Hoping to resolve the matter with a blockade of deadly battleships, the greedy Trade Federation has stopped all shipping to the small planet of Naboo. While the Congress of the Republic endlessly debates this alarming chain of events, the Supreme Chancellor has secretly dispatched 2 Jedi Knights, the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, to settle the conflict.
Hello there, and welcome back to 6 Degrees of Star Wars, the podcast where we explore all the ways George Lucas's flagship franchise surrounds us, binds us, and penetrates us in the landscape of cinema. I'm your host, Sam Marchioni. Joining me today, Ellie McConaughey.
Every time I think I'm out of Star Wars discourse, they pull me back in.
And Shamila Karanakran.
Somewhere, someone is regretting the decision to take on this film. The answer is always George.
Listeners, we are here to talk about the much maligned first entry in the prequel trilogy, The Phantom Menace, aka George remakes The Hidden Fortress again, and this time he's picking different ways to be similar to it and different ways to be different. Oh, George. Shami, you weren't on the Hidden Fortress episode, correct?
No,
Ellie was.
no.
Have you seen The Hidden Fortress previously?
No. So you're gonna have to, run me through it, because I do know, the droids are based on 2 of the characters?
Yeah, so The Hidden Fortress set the basic strokes that Star Wars Episode 4 has, and that this one has, in that we are following an assortment of lowly, kind of wild cards who get pulled into the plight of a young noblewoman, and they have to take her on an adventure to save her from some kind of evil force. And at the end, they do that, and it's good, and there's a celebration. I'm making it sound way less cool than it is. The Hidden Fortress is a very good movie.
I do see the similar beats, but I kind of saw, the Phantom Menace in terms of, action sequences. It feels more like wuxia to me than, traditional kendo fighting in samurai films.
Honestly, one of the bigger influences on the Phantom Menace that I think kind of gets, I don't want to say ignored, but, kind of overlooked because people like the samurai influences, and those are still everywhere, is, I feel like it has a lot of stuff from, Sword and Sandals type movies.
Yeah, Phantom Menace is the one where George, I think, was the most all over the place in terms of his inspirations, because Naboo has a very Mediterranean Europe aesthetic. A lot of its buildings were either in Spain or in Italy, which is already a mismatch because a lot of the locations used in Spain are left over from when Spain was under the control of the Islamic Caliphate. Which is different from, the Reconquista and whatnot. But then Naboo's fashion aesthetic is a mix between European Renaissance and whatever East Asian countries, especially George was looking at and pointing, that looks cool, I want that in my movie.
Yeah, so I did find, the Eastern fashion inspiration for it. Where is it?
Is this about the Mongolian Senate dress that...
Yeah.
Yeah, so it generally gets attributed to Queen Genapil.
So they took inspiration from Chinese, Tibetan, and Mongolian historical fashion, but the hairstyles are kind of more Japanese because traditional Chinese hairstyles will put the hair flat on their heads and add huge headdresses on top of that. But in traditional noble women Japanese hairstyles, they're based on creating volume from the roots by using hair rolls. And I do know that another traditional aspect is that long tail, trailing down the back.
Yeah. Welcome, listeners, also to the start of my chronic Padme Amidala addiction.
There are worse addictions to have.
That was new?
Do I absolutely have every single outfit she's ever worn in animation and live action saved on my hard drive? Yes, I do. It's for a project. Shut up. There's a reason for it, but I have them labeled various things, this one normally I label them by, like, whatever scene they're in, but sometimes there'll be labels like, I hate this fucking outfit, or God, George, why? But those are for later movies.
So, like, I think the cross-cultural thing, and we will get into a lot of the weird racial stuff happening in Phantom Menace, because there is a lot.
Not to mention the cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
Like, I also mentioned, like, with the makeup, like, the white makeup with the red dots on Queen Amidala's cheeks. It's a style of makeup used by brides in traditional Korean weddings. And also the Scar of Remembrance is how Manchu women in the Qing Dynasty used to paint their lips.
Right, that's exactly where I'm kind of like going with this. I think that George Lucas, and we'll get into the ways this is really affects this movie more than I think any of the others, including Attack of the Clones. But I think that George Lucas, he has said as much that he is much more of a visuals guy. He's more interested in visuals than he is in like actual proper storytelling. And so like, one of my main theories about Phantom Menace is that Phantom Menace, more than any other film, is the movie where you ran into issues where George is like, oh, that looks really cool. I just want to put that in my movie with no regard for what it actually means. And at this point, he was too famous for anyone to go, no, George, what the fuck is wrong with you?
He did not have a Marcia Lucas this time.
Mm-hmm.
He did not have a Marcia Lucas. Urban legend goes, I've never been able to confirm it, I think I've mentioned this before. Urban legend goes that Carrie Fisher was an uncredited script doctor on the prequels.
The rumor is that she wrote the first meeting between R2 and 3PO.
Absolutely can believe it, because goddamn, they're still perfect.
I
love my little droid husbands so much.
I mean, you can really see what I feel is like the Lucas problem with the acting. Like, there's this really great interview with Harrison Ford, and he's told the story a few times, but it's like, and again, he's trying to be polite about it, but he says like the problem with acting for George Lucas is that he doesn't really understand acting process. So he's just there, like, just say the words that I wrote. It's fine. And you're over there, the actor, like, no, I need to go through my process so this can be like authentic. And you can really start to see that, like, since George Lucas is now George Lucas, he is now a famous director, owner of the biggest media franchise in history. None of these actors, including Liam Neeson, who is a big name, can just go, shut the fuck up, George, I'm working, give me a minute. And they're just doing very flat, unprepared performances.
It's interesting to see who can get away with more than other people, because, to be clear, Liam Neeson's not the only big name here. There's Samuel fucking L. Jackson, who...
Mace Windu.
We're gonna get into it more in episodes 2 and 3, but Mace Windu got the shaft, man. He got stuck with the fandom racism stick once people decided they were done hating Jar Jar. But there was also, like, Terrence Stamp was in this. Terrence Stamp is dead to me because of this movie, because he made creepy remarks in an interview about Natalie Portman, and I'm like, dude, she was 17. Like, think before you talk.
Think with your brain. That's actually one of the reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I feel like what the internet did to Jake Lloyd was beyond the pale, but like, you know, you read interviews with child actors. Working with a child actor is really fucking hard, because you have to, like, work around a kid's mindset and, like, interact with adults. Most of the really good child actors will have a story or two of, like, the director or this actor I was working with really pulled me aside and helped me understand how I was going to do this. And meanwhile, I just feel like Jake Lloyd is just completely up there, just left out to dry. He's doing better than I would have at 10.
He only did, like, one movie after this, and then he quit acting for good. Like, he's still technically in the film industry because he's doing editing, but still, this was, like, a horrific experience for him, especially with the backlash.
Yeah.
I mean, good for him still staying in the industry, especially because he's been since diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic, which, you know, the harassment he faced couldn't have helped there. But to go back to the process, Jake Lloyd is really, I think, really good at performing when he doesn't have to say the dialogue.
Oh,
because
man,
I would bet you dollars to donuts he's saying the dialogue as George told him to say the dialogue. Like,
It's-
100% this is a George thing. And it's also, like, you can see, I don't think George really knew how to talk to children. Like, you have that scene of Anakin and his friends at the pod race beforehand. I love little Kitster Benai so much. That boy is so adorable. He's played by an actor named Dhruv Chanchani. He is so freaking cute. But then when you see him at the end of the pod race, and there's the little Rhodian kid next to him, and they're like awkwardly kind of dancing around each other, and it's like they look like they want to go in for a hug or a high five, but they're worried that they're gonna mess up the costumes or something.
Supposedly, at some point, at some like stage of script writing, that Rhodian kid was Greedo.
No, I think that was a different Rhodian kid who was Greedo.
That was a deleted scene because Anakin was beating one of the other kids because he accused Anakin of cheating, and one of the other kids told Greedo immediately after the fight that he regret picking fights like that one day. And guess what happens to Greedo?
Well, he shot first.
He shoots first.
God damn it.
Come fight me, internet. Do you think I fear you?
No, we're talking about the Phantom Menace. We fear no man except George Lucas, scriptwriter. I mean, like, that's the other thing. An understated aspect of A New Hope is that most of the actors, but especially Harrison Ford, whose ongoing contempt for Star Wars warms my heart, rewrote or improvised their dialogue on the spot. Like, most of them were not saying their lines as written, and that's fine. You know, a lot of great movies have very heavily improv dialogue. Men in Black was very much rewritten to be for Will Smith.
Yeah, but again, we've kind of mentioned it. A New Hope also had Marsha Lucas in its corner.
Yeah.
This one did not. And, like, another person who I think suffers for this is Natalie Portman, who was at, like, this weird phase in her career where she was kind of transitioning out of the weirdness that Luc Besson saddled her in with The Professional. Yes, ew. And then she winds up in a role where George Lucas is making her do this voice that's part transatlantic accent, part British accent, and it's supposed to come off as very stilted and formal because it's Amidala as, like, this professional mask. But it just sounds really, really weird because it even, like, they went back in and ADR'd it even when they arguably didn't need it. ADR'd.
Amidala is a character that I like a lot in concept, but a lot about her reads like the script was a first draft. Like, she's the queen, but the queen is an elected official, but also, like, you guys elected a 17-year-old to be your queen?
She's 14 here.
She's 14, played by a 17-year-old.
Yes.
To quote The Good Place, okay, but that's worse. You do understand how that's worse, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I'm gonna get on my soapbox to go into expanded lore and stuff. The cultural reason that Naboo gives for why children are elected as leaders is because children are expected to make the more altruistic decisions while taking the advice of the adults who are around them as their counselors.
You do realize how that's a problem, right?
It supposedly works because Naboo as a culture is supposed to have, like, this big fascination on public service, and kids, like, go into their careers super, super early. Like, honestly, the more I'm saying this, the more Naboo seems like it's ripe for a dystopian YA series.
I mean, like, that sounds super interesting, and, like, that reads to me like writing in reverse. Like, I've said this about all the stuff where people are like, well, now if you watch all 8 seasons of the Clone Wars and then watch Revenge of the Sith, it's really good. I'm like, okay, where's that stuff in the movie? I feel like a lot of that, and I said this about a lot of EU stuff. A lot of EU stuff is people having the answer and writing backwards to try to get an explanation. You know, I use the Kessel Run as my main example of that. People have been trying to explain what Han meant when he blew what parsecs meant for 50 years at this point.
Also, I don't think people realize, like, how much pressure and danger that, like, the elected queens are in. Like, if you think about the blasters hidden in the queen's throne and how she and the handmaidens and everyone working around her are apparently expert shots with them. It makes you wonder how common is political assassination on Naboo that they have to have these countermeasures in place.
Well, if you go by what is now not EU but official canon according to Disney, it's been released by Disney under their label, it's been audiobooked with the voice actors from the Clone Wars, it's considered official. There's a trilogy called Queen's Shadow, Queen's Peril, Queen's Hope. They're all written by E.K. Johnston, who is a very white feminist writer who misses some stuff. I'm not giving it my blanket endorsement, but she goes into the idea that Padme was elected right as the Trade Federation was clearly starting to eye Naboo and its neighbors. And so this whole idea of basically turning the Queen's handmaidens into a battle force around her was a new idea cooked up by her head of security, Quarsh Panaka. Mm-hmm. Which, another thing in the George Lucas names of conventions, the actor who plays Quarsh Panaka is named Hugh Quarshie.
Yes. Yes.
Real creative, George. Huge stretch. Great job.
I'm going to ask this question because it's one of the things this is one of the things people try to use to tempt me to read Star Wars EU. Is that Queen's Whatever trilogy, the one where the two handmaidens are gay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm still not reading it.
I'll send you the PDF with my notes about it later.
Ooh.
Spark notes for one very specific niche fascination.
I mean, like, I feel like the Amidala gets elected when the Trade Federation starts eyeing it. Like, I feel like if I go back to, like, the single core problem that this movie has, aside from the fact that, like, all of its action scenes are very repetitive and kind of overlong, it's that the stakes are so loose. I am not clear on why the Trade Federation is blockading Naboo or what that's actually doing.
We do get, like Amidala saying, that communications are blocked out and that it's a really bad situation, but we don't actually physically see the consequences of what's going on. So I think that's part of why.
That's part of it. But Ellie, to answer your question as to why the Trade Federation is doing this, they're doing this because Darth Sidious told them to. And let's throw the big spoiler out there, guys. Darth Sidious is Palpatine!
Palpatine!
What?
I didn't take a super lot of notes for the Phantom Menace because I've seen this movie a bunch of times before and I know what I have to say about it. But I have this note right at the front, and I will admit, I don't like writing in reverse, but I will admit the sort of final moment in Revenge of the Sith with the Trade Federation guys, where it finally catches up to him, oh my god, I've been a patsy this whole time. That's a good moment. That actually worked for me a lot. And I have in my notes that man, everyone knows these two Jedi have arrived on your ship. You should have realized you were a patsy the moment Palps' response to that was kill him. Kill these two ambassadors of this ancient warrior order.
But yeah, so basically the plan is blockade Naboo, somehow call for a vote of no confidence in Valorum, become Supreme Chancellor so I can start amassing power and slowly break things down even further because the Trade Federation will now be pissed and they'll start forming a confederacy of independent systems who are all about capitalism, yada, yada, yada. And as this continues, I'll exploit it into war, and people will keep giving me more and more power, and then I make an empire and I win forever. Hooray.
And that actually worked.
It did work.
It fucking worked.
Those I meant in just the context of this movie, I'm not clear on what reason the Trade Federation has given for why they're blockading Naboo. If it gets mentioned, it's very quick, and I still haven't totally registered it. I'm not clear on what that's accomplishing for anybody. Naboo seems fine. There does not seem to be any deprivations due to, and maybe that's again Naboo is a very honestly, I have a lot of problems with Naboo as a location. Except for Coruscant, I think I have a lot of problems with most of the locations in this movie. I have this note: Jigsaw voice, dear Star Wars writer, you are trapped in this sand trap. If you can't write a full Star Wars trilogy without going to Tatooine once, it will fill with sand and you'll die.
Well, I mean, we had to go to Tatooine because we have to, A, have Anakin Skywalker there, B, leave Shmi Skywalker there because Owen Lars has not been introduced yet.
Yeah. That has always been a point of contention with me because if you're not going to at least if you're at least going to separate mother and son, at least put the mother in a safe place so to guarantee your safety.
Yeah, see, some people theorize that Qui-Gon was gonna do that.
It was in a deleted scene. It was in a deleted scene. He tried to wave the bat to include Shmi.
That wasn't a deleted scene though. That was That's where I got my Chance Cube audio that's in every episode.
He does like ask for both Shmi and Anakin, and
Yeah.
then I'm just not clear on why, oh, we have the gratitude of the fucking queen of this lush, rich-looking planet. Can you scrounge up like a couple
favor?
grand, head back to like? I know that he doesn't accept Republic credits, although again, like if you're just gonna like steal
Again,
from
he
him,
could have at least traded like credits for something else, or they could have like paid like a transporter or like a smuggler to get them to the Jedi Council and promised a reward. You literally did not have to do the whole bet with Watto.
The
Yeah.
way Watto made it sound, he made it sound like credits aren't going to be good anywhere in Mos Espa.
but he could mind trick other people because Watto apparently just has some genetic.
Okay,
I'm
let's fucking deal with the Watto of it all.
I'm gonna first say, and I've said this about Watto my entire life. Even when I was like 9 years old, this has been a consistent issue for me. I don't like that Watto is genetically immune to mind tricks.
No.
I didn't think Jabba the Hutt was genetically immune to mind tricks. I thought he was a strong-willed kind of guy who was like, no, I know what I want. Fuck your mind trick. I don't know. I don't like...
Yeah. And
I can taste the Rey Skywalkerification of Star Wars coming, and I hate it.
Yep. Watto's accent, absolutely offensive. It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen like the documentary of Problem with Apu. It's like when Hank Azaria he put on an Indian accent for a convenience store owner role
Ellie
that did
and
not
I
have
both
an
know The
accent in the
Simpsons.
first place, and that was how the Apu of it all happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know the stereotypes associated with Watto. I know how bad they are, especially with his big, stupid elephant seal nose.
Yeah.
Which I maintain George looked at that design, he was like, I want an elephant seal that also looks like a dragonfly. But pairing it with that voice was definitely a choice. And I have also seen this movie a bunch of times, so I was looking away, and when I was looking away, it didn't sound like the stereotype that's most associated with it, the anti-Semitic thing. To me, it sounded like an Italian-American New Yorker going like, hey, I'm walking here, right?
Well, initially, like when it was in the 1999 release in theaters, like I was the one, like my whole class went to see it. The accent that Watto had there was vaguely Middle Eastern, and then later on in later releases, they changed it to more Italian.
I'll talk about CGI Yoda later. I don't know. I watched this on Disney Plus, and I will say, I have to filter this joke through my boyfriend because he's the one who told it, because he's the one who's allowed to tell this joke. We live in Connecticut. We both hang out in New York and New Jersey pretty regularly. We have friends and other partners who live around there. And one time we were like meeting someone, and Zandy, who is Jewish, looks at me and goes, oh, is he Jewish? And I said, no, he's Italian. And he sort of goes, oh, same difference. So like him sounding Italian, sounding like an Italian guy from like New York, New Jersey is not really like, it is one step removed from him sounding Jewish, if that makes any sense.
My dad's an Italian guy from New Jersey.
So you get it. And like, yeah, there's a lot happening there. This is what I mean when I say, I don't think George Lucas is racist in the
He just doesn't think things through.
Exactly. This is what I mean when I say I don't think he's a very thoughtful creator. I think he like had an idea in his head, like, oh, I want him to look like a bodega owner from like Queens or something, and just didn't think what he was saying when he put this character together.
To give George Lucas credit, he did try to pass this off on other people.
But they insisted, no, this is your baby, you have to do this.
Yeah, he tried to give it to Spielberg, he tried to give it to Ron Howard, he tried to give it to Robert Zemeckis, and if he'd given it to Zemeckis, I think it would have ended up even more racist, personally.
Yeah.
I do not care for Robert Zemeckis. Like, I love Roger Rabbit, but I do not care for Robert Zemeckis.
I think that, like, I don't know, I would be interested in seeing at least the universe where Robert Zemeckis directed this.
Send Ire later.
I find that interesting because, like, I think my friend Todd said when we were talking about Phantom Menace recently, like, it's like halfway between a movie and a tech preview for like what CGI could be. And Robert Zemeckis is, if you look over his career, just an incredible tech fetishist. And this was also like, you know, I'll talk about Robert on my own podcast when one day we get to fucking Forrest Gump. Uh,
Eh.
which is a movie I despise. But he has made a lot of movies I do like. But this was like the tail end. Like he had one more movie I like in him, which I do like, Castaway, Sue Me. And then he just never made a movie I can stand again. I haven't seen Here. Maybe Here is good. I tend to doubt it.
I would have been most interested to see Ron Howard's take, just because I like Ron Howard, and really Ron Howard is best when he's working with a creative script. Like, I still love Willow, and, you know, Ron Howard did his best with Solo. I would have liked to see him work on a Star Wars movie that was not hampered by creative differences with two notoriously creatively difficult people. We've kind of talked about how many famous people were in this movie, as in already famous people, but the number of people in this who went on to become famous, like, the big one is probably Keira Knightley as Sabé, future disaster bisexual, and also Pirate King of the Bisexuals.
Oh, exciting.
God. Oh no, Pirate King of the Bisexuals is referring to Elizabeth Swann Turner, Ellie. It's not to do with Sabé as a character, unfortunately. But
I mean, I like her as Elizabeth Swann.
The bisexual awakening for everybody who missed seeing The Mummy 1999.
Hey, some of us watched The X-Files like God intended.
But it's also like Sofia Coppola is playing another one of the Handmaidens and actually got a fucking Razzie for it. I don't remember if it was a Razzie win or a nomination, but the Razzies are fucking bullshit.
The Razzies are fucking bullshit, and one of the reasons that they're bullshit is people make fun of the Oscars for, like, having favorites. Once the Razzies hate somebody, they will not let it go. That is 100% just them still being mean to her over Godfather Part 3. Because she's not in the movie. Like, she's in the background, she's there, but she's not a character. She doesn't, like, have speeches or monologues.
Right.
That's just them being assholes. And fuck the Razzies. They're assholes. They're not fun.
And they also gave Worst Supporting Actor to Ahmed Best. And listen, when I say Ahmed Best is not the problem. On paper, everything about Jar Jar Binks is about children. Even his fucking name was the idea of George Lucas's son. Jar Jar is a child. Jar Jar is loud and excitable and running around like his brain isn't connected to his limbs, and if there is anything more like a child, I do not know it. But he's also got some really nice, smart moments.
The problem is that he's not a human child. If he's an alien child, then he's, like, technically an alien Scrappy.
Yeah. But there are some moments where he's really smart, like the moment when he's got the droid locked around his ankle in the final battle and he realizes he can, like, kick it to make it fire. That's adorable.
So like, one of the problems with Jar Jar in the modern era is, like, much like Jake Lloyd, like, what the internet did to Ahmed Best is genuinely like, man, how do you get up in the morning knowing you harass some poor actor just for doing his job? Like, what's wrong with you?
It got to the point where he made a podcast about it called The Internet's First Main Character.
Right. But, like, but none of that changes the fact that, like, you know, I just have it in my notes, man, hating Jar Jar is a tedious cliche, but man, he keeps stepping on the tone of the movie, and I think it's just because everyone is so flat that the movie is so serious. Like, we were talking about this earlier, that you think he's no more annoying than C-3PO. Okay. If you want to tell me that C-3PO is annoying, I will open my heart to you. We are comrades. But I feel like C-3PO doesn't really step on the tone of the scenes that he's in the way that, like, Jar Jar does. Which is not the actor's fault. This is very much a writing and editing problem. The Phantom Menace's tone is very weird.
And the fact that they made him speak in that terrible patois.
When did they start introducing sensitivity readers? Because boy, did this movie need one.
Yeah, I know. But it was the late 90s. Again, not an excuse, but
during the big final battle, which is like, I said that all of the action sequences are kind of like overlong and repetitive, and they are.
Aren't there like 4 final battles technically?
This is precisely the issue. Like, I do like Duel of the Fates. It has the problem that most of the prequel lightsaber fights have, where it feels kind of like fake. It feels kind of over choreographed, but it's a good fight. But then they keep cutting back to Jar Jar and to Anakin, and like the tone goes everywhere. I don't know.
Honestly, I don't have an issue with that in concept. I did get to see this movie in theaters for its 25th anniversary earlier this year.
Ooh.
And that was my first time seeing it on the big screen, because in 1999, I was too little and I didn't care about Star Wars. But seeing it now for the first time on a big screen, it felt amazing and cinematic. And yes, the CGI has definitely not held up in certain places. And I know I've kind of made a name for myself as the person who screams out practical effects every time I see them. But this movie kind of gets a pass because I know George. I know George is just a guy who is always excited to play with new toys and make new toys, and I cannot fault him for wanting to essentially pioneer a technology.
There is a very strong argument that without Jar Jar, Gollum doesn't exist. And for 1999, I will admit, Jar Jar is an incredible feat of special effects for 1999.
And there's also a lot of really good practical effects in this too. Like, for example, shout out to Silas Carson, who is incredibly attractive, but spends this entire movie under massive amounts of prosthetics as both Ki-Adi-Mundi and Newt Gonray.
Good for him.
I'm serious, that man is a silver fox.
He is very hot.
He actually technically he plays 4 roles. The other 2 are like little minor roles. He was putting double duty on a lot of things. I think a lot of...
Yeah, he's also the Nemoidian senator in the Senate scene, and also one of the pilot... I think he's the pilot who does the Wilhelm scream. But he might be a different pilot. Also, take a shot. Star Wars did a Wilhelm scream.
You know, it's fairly common for people who are doing really heavy makeup for very specific scenes of really heavy practical effects to, like, pull multiple roles. You know, the guy who played Lurtz in Fellowship was also inside the armor in Sauron because they needed a big guy. Or, like, you know, Doug Jones plays both Pan and the Pale Man in Pan's Labyrinth. It's just, that is a skill set. It is an extremely impressive skill set when it's done well. I think that's one of the reasons why Lord of the Rings is so impressive, that not only are all the practical effects very impressive, but all the internal acting is very good, and the hobbits exist. And
probably the actually only on-screen Asian in Star Wars so far, because
what about Kitster?
Oh yeah, Kitster. But he was like such a blink and a miss role, so like I know he was the one who called Qui-Gon a wizard.
He called the Pod Wizard.
Yeah.
But he was so cute. I love those little kids. They're so adorable. And one of them is George Lucas's daughter, Amy. And because of him including his daughter, braces are canonical to Star Wars.
You know what else is canonical to Star Wars? Angels, apparently.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to go on a Clone Wars tangent? Because technically what Anakin's referring to angels are a race called the Diatham, who are literally, like, glowing white women with wings.
Okay. But then there's actually, the word rendezvous also exists, so that means also French exists, and by extension, Spanish and Latin also exist.
And ducks exist. Just regular ducks. I'm reminded of that scene in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
The king is having a party at the palace tonight for his pet bear. You mean platypus bear? No, it just says bear.
Certainly you mean his pet skunk bear.
Or his armadillo bear. Gopher bear? Just bear.
You know, every so often this kind of stuff comes up, and I think that Tolkien is really the one who did it right, because, like, canonically those books are translations, so none of the words that they use exist in Middle-earth. Tolkien just translated it from its original text, and I think that that's sort of where I land on Star Wars. Like, falcons exist in Star Wars. Okay, I have to understand what they're saying, so whatever. I guess rendezvous exists. It's fine. It's okay.
Don't worry about it.
Yes. To quote Mystery Science Theater 3000, just repeat to yourself, it's only a show. I should really just relax.
Ellie, if we did that, we wouldn't have a fucking podcast. And speaking of Lord of the Rings, you know who else is in here? Fucking Richard Armitage.
He was uncredited. I think he was a pilot?
Yeah, he's Captain Tonra in the scene where Amidala comes to the Gungans and offers humility. And honestly, that's what confuses me more about the political situation on Naboo more than anything. I want to understand exactly what the relationship between the Gungans and the Naboo has been up to this point.
Well, you see, Sam, they form a symbiote circle. What happens to one of them will affect the other. You must understand this. Sorry.
Can you feel me trying to force choke you through the internet?
And I don't know. I think Boss Nas also implies like the surface dweller Naboos kind of look down on like the underwater city dwellers.
Right. But then there's also a point where like it's mentioned that they generally live in peace, but also we do need to address the Naboo are not native to this planet. They are colonizers.
It's also like there is, and it's one of those moments where like it's one of the things that makes the script feel like a first draft. There's a blink and you'll miss it line where like they kind of imply that the underwater Gungan cities are like myths, and that's why the droid army has to go looking for them. But like that seems like such a weird line. I don't know. Like, I do want to know more about the political situation on Naboo, but they already spend way too long on political situations in this movie.
Although, honestly, like, this movie's 25 years old, and god damn it, am I feeling it? Like, people complain about the Senate scenes, but how fucking true. We should do something. No, let's first form a committee to decide whether we should do something. And all the while, people are fucking dying.
There's a famous quote that I remain very fond of, which is, liberals will be convening committees to discuss the rise of fascism until there are boots in the corridors. And, like, that seems like the thing the movie is trying to be about, or the trilogy as a whole is trying to be about. Ineffectual liberal governance leads to the rise of a charismatic fascist leader who promises he can cut through the bullshit and get the job done and make the Republic great. No, I'm not doing that.
Don't you fucking dare.
I mean, like, and I've said this multiple times now, and I'll say it again. It is very much Star Wars is always more of a reflection of its time period than people realize. They tend to be written very, very fast. So, like, it feels very much like it's a reflection of the Clinton years, of horrible things happening around the world. The big one being Rwanda, while the global north, especially America, just sat back and discussed what we should do about Rwanda while a horrible genocide was happening. And famously, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith became very, very, very explicitly about the Bush administration. Like, ridiculously on the nose.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I dislike that. Like, I still don't know how I feel about that. Maybe I should have been on Revenge of the Sith. But this feels to me like a reflection of the Clinton administration, but the Clinton administration, especially late in its years, became such like a haze to modern people. Like, you'd be surprised how many people don't remember anything about Clinton except for Lewinsky and NAFTA. And also it feels less explicit and on the nose in light of the other two that are, again, much more open about what they're about. So I don't know. I feel like that's where this movie kind of landed.
Yeah.
That's what I think it's trying to be about. I don't think it gets all the way there.
I think this was also probably a point where it feels like on some levels this movie was made for the media illiterate, because a lot of this dialogue is very tell, don't show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being very overt in saying, this is bad. I do not want this to happen. Mm-hmm. And people decided that was bad, so they started checking out of thinking critically about both the media they consume and their politics.
The Phantom Menace is a movie that fascinates me in retrospect because in a lot of ways it's the flashpoint for a lot of stuff, both in what Star Wars became in the modern era and how people consume Star Wars in the modern era. And it all starts here with people watching a movie they were disappointed by and harassing two of its actors out of fame.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that makes it fascinating. I don't know if I still have enough distance from it to take it out of that context and examine it on its own. Now you can't get me to shut up.
Oops.
Mwah.
To go way, way back to your suggestion that this feels like a first draft, we know it's not a first draft because there were apparently a ton of different concepts that didn't get used in the end. Like, at one point, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were going to have their names reversed. And so Ewan McGregor would be playing a character that we called Qui-Gon for the majority of the movie. And then when Liam Neeson's character died, Ewan McGregor's character would take on the name Obi-Wan Kenobi to honor his master and try to live up to that memory, which I'm glad they got rid of it, because the more that I think about it, the more that probably would have fucked up Anakin even more. Like, you took the name of the person who actually wanted to have me around, and now you're only having me around because you feel a sense of obligation to him.
Mm-hmm. Naturally.
It's just... I don't know. I think most of this movie is, like, in want of a Qui-Gon. Like, if Qui-Gon had lived and he had lived long enough to mentor Anakin, and if Obi-Wan didn't have to be, like, grieving and traumatized, I feel like a lot of the plot, I mean, like, Palpatine's plot would have slowed down a little.
A little, but odds are that would just have put, like, a target on Qui-Gon's head for a different mission. Maybe it'll be Qui-Gon that I frame for a mass slaughter of an indigenous tribe, and we're not there yet. We're not there yet. But God, that cute little kid with the bowl cut and the necklace and the squeaky little voice, he's gonna grow up to do so much murder.
I do remember, these are hazy memories of the late 90s. I do remember that poster of Jake Lloyd with the Darth Vader shadow behind it. That shit rules. There are things about this movie that rules.
Darth Maul's whole design and that double-ended lightsaber that he uses as a bow staff. Oh,
so impractical, but so cool.
Yeah, the whole theater was gasping when that reveal came.
I've said this on several occasions about various Star Wars films, and a lot of my favorite moments in Star Wars aren't big important acting moments or expressive monologues. They are combinations of sound and visual that just hit you. Rey catching the lightsaber, Luke standing out looking at the twin suns. It's the moment where everything lines up and bam, you're there. And the double doors opening and the music rising and Darth Maul just standing, that's one of those moments.
And apparently Natalie Portman's reaction to Darth Maul in that moment was real because she was so taken back at seeing the full look.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great moment.
I'm trying to think if the prequels have any other moments like that where it just hits just right. I think the moment where Anakin and Obi-Wan are grappling in front of the lava waterfall is like that for me.
The thunderous applause one has kind of gotten to that point too, I think.
Yeah.
If I did have one little issue with Duel of the Fates, it's that the final stage of it that takes place in that reactor or whatever, it's such a visually different environment from everything else. There's so much other cool stuff in that fight. The part where each of them is in their own little blaster shield area, and Qui-Gon's sitting, waiting patiently. Maul is stalking around like an animal. Obi-Wan's all tense and trying to not charge in and get himself hurt, but he's so clearly terrified. That's fucking cool. But when they get into that reactor shaft area, I cannot help but feel like we're back on the fucking Death Star.
You're not wrong. And I do think it's interesting that what I feel like are some of the best acting moments in the movie, and you're right, that scene would be in there, are dialogue-free ones where, Ray Park and Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor all have to communicate who they are and what they're feeling in this moment entirely through their body language. I will also say, just to throw the kid a bone, another really good acting moment. I really like the scene where Anakin says goodbye to Shmi. I think it works.
Yeah.
I cannot watch that scene. It hurts too much right now.
No, especially with what happens to Shmi in the sequel. No.
Well, it's not even because of what happens to Shmi. It's that, May the 4th was when my grandmother died.
Oh no.
So, I see that scene, and I see her telling him not to look back, and it just...
It's heartbreaking.
I want to go back for one more hug. If I knew that was the last time I truly got to see someone I loved so much... Jesus Christ, I'm sorry.
No.
It's 100% fine.
Pivot. Pernilla August has actually played Mary, the mother of Jesus, so that's 2 messiahs she's birthed.
Oh.
And in this case especially, he's not the messiah, he's a very naughty boy.
I was just gonna say, like, I wanted to tell if that was just like a me thing, because, like, for reasons that are pretty obvious, I got a thing about moms. Go see Petite Maman. It's really good. You'll bawl. But no, obviously, like, it's a good scene, and yeah, he is a very naughty boy. I do actually. There is one last point that I have to bring up, and I sort of alluded to it a minute ago, which is like, we got to talk about the. I say that the ways Star Wars is made and consumed start a lot here. Man, the tightening of Star Wars as a franchise really starts here with Darth Vader made C-3PO.
Yeah.
I can roll, so to speak, with R2-D2, although that also kind of bugs me a little bit. But, like, Darth Vader made C-3PO, man. Ugh.
I mean, it's not like he remembers that Darth Vader made him.
It's not so much like the in-character stuff. It's more like, how do I put this? Well, I made this joke. It's one of my most famous tweets on the former Hell site that I'm no longer on. Is I was chatting with a friend of mine on there about Star Wars, and he said, like, Star Wars is about seeing cool little puppets, which, by the way, yes, Disney, I want the original version of Phantom Menace on there. Put that Yoda puppet back in there. And I made the joke, which is a joke that I make about modern Star Wars a lot. No, Star Wars is about a person you know going to a place that you know and saying the names of other people and places that you know. And people really responded to that.
Yeah, I'd believe you if anything Disney ever did actually went back to Naboo.
Right.
We are 10 years into Disney having the franchise. I have not heard Padme Amidala's name spoken in live action once.
I'm going to go ahead and say, are you suggesting that the Star Wars creators and fandom are weird about women, Sam?
Like, that's new?
No, my point is just that, like, the problem I have with a lot of modern Star Wars and a lot of modern franchise building in general is that it all feels very much like the same 25 people are responsible for everything. Tony Stark both built Ultron, and also it turns out he's Doctor Doom for some goddamn reason.
What?
You know, it is much more about web of interconnected details than it is about telling an interesting story. And I feel like there's no purpose in C-3PO being here. He adds nothing to the plot in this movie. His existence makes very little sense. I built him to help Mom. You built a protocol droid to help your mom?
Well, we have to establish Anakin as a deadbeat dad very early on. He left his son for his mother to take care of.
I'm totally off topic here. I don't know. It feels like that is the moment where Star Wars started to contract, where it stopped being a big, wide galaxy where you could meet other people, and Star Wars stopped feeling like a war between massive factions, started to feel like
a family drama.
The same 25, a feud between the same 20 people ruining everything for everyone. That's my
everything
opinion.
A goddamn ordeal in local area family.
And that is exactly the Onion headline that was in my head. Yes.
I mean, there's more that could be gone into. The number of people I've had to fight on the internet who try to claim that Padme Amidala is a cougar because of this movie.
What?
Fuck me.
And another number of people who are like, oh my god, why wasn't Padme into Obi-Wan? Why would she not be into Obi-Wan, who's older than her? And also, Ewan McGregor was so hot back then. I'm like, I'm sorry, you have more problems with a 9-year-old having a crush on a 14-year-old than you do with the idea of a 14-year-old having a crush on a 25-year-old.
Also, to be clear, like, I'm sorry, I know that she ends up marrying him 15 years down the line. She is extremely clearly not into him in this movie. She is humoring him. She has a little kid who has a crush on her, and she is clearly humoring him. Everything about the writing and acting tells me that.
I think she thinks he's like a cute little guy, but she's not taking the crush seriously or anything. It's
no.
Like, he's cute. He's harmless. He's not gonna shoot down an entire control station of droids. He's just a little guy.
He's absolutely not going to murder a dozen children on the off chance that it might save her life. Come on.
Oh.
I hate that I have to do this, but every time people are like, oh, well, if it wasn't for Jar Jar, the Emperor wouldn't have risen to power. I'm like, by your logic, if it wasn't for Padme, the Emperor never would have risen to power.
The power either way. Everyone is set up to lose this way.
And if Hamlet had gone and gotten therapy, the plot wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Yes, things in a story happen because things in a story happen. That's how stories work.
Yeah, I will say, a huge bullet we dodged, but also made, like, a headache for the Wikipedia editors. Bale Antilles gets name-dropped in one scene, but the implication was that it was going to be the same character who was eventually played by Jimmy Smits, and it's some pasty-faced white guy I don't know, and all I can say is, thank God we didn't end up seeing him.
No.
I haven't been on Wikipedia in years. Are they still doing, like, slightly taller Luke stuff over there, where Luke appears slightly taller in some scenes, and therefore they think whatever?
I have no idea. Wikipedia has kind of dropped off my radar recently, but I do feel for all the editors who got shit because of the Acolyte and people being like, why did you change Ki-Adi-Mundi's birth date?
Because
and honestly,
that's how canon works.
Because writers don't do math.
And fucking watching this again reminded me that, goddamn, The Acolyte is like the only bit of Disney Star Wars that has shown any kind of affection for the prequels' atmosphere and themes, and I miss The Acolyte.
Bring back The Acolyte.
I liked The Acolyte less than you, but yeah, it was the only one that seemed like it was interested in following up on its themes, except maybe the movie that I'm not going to name because I don't want to start a fight.
I mean, I don't know how much I liked The Acolyte, but I was excited to see where it was going. It felt more interesting than the rest of Disney Star Wars, which, keep in mind, I haven't seen Andor, so just exclude Andor from this. But yes, Ellie's assessment that Disney Star Wars is about people you know, going to a place that you know, and talking about things you know, that is very Disney Star Wars.
It's a lot of modern franchise building in general. It's gotten to the point where, like, I was just extremely excited that Dune Part 2, rather than just being an exercise in franchise building, is like a story with a point. And as much as I say that, like, the contraction of Star Wars starts here, whatever its faults, The Phantom Menace is trying to be a story with a point. The whole prequels, whatever their faults, are very much built on George Lucas's idiosyncrasies. I guess there's some value in that, if nothing else.
And it's like poetry, it rhymes.
It's very interesting to me that the only other mainline Star Wars that I'm willing to sign up for is the one that I feel like is the least about someone's idiosyncrasies. What's wrong with my brain, Sam?
I can't even begin to answer that question.
Love you too.
Oh, you know who else was in this movie, apparently? Sally fucking Hawkins.
Oh yeah,
Good
she
shit.
was an uncredited villager.
Oh, that's fun.
So many people in this movie, because this was filmed largely in England, so, you know, they had time for British people to be there for a day as an extra, you know?
Yeah.
Before they had to go off to Tunisia to film the Tatooine scenes again.
Oh.
I mean, everyone knows that everybody's favorite big voiced man voiced
Boss Nass.
that's his name.
Brian Blessed.
Brian Blessed!
Like, he originally auditioned for, I think it was, wait, give me a second. I have it here. Yeah, okay. So he originally auditioned for the role of Sio Bibble, like the governor of Naboo, but he was considered too loud for it.
The death toll is catastrophic!
So the casting director approached him to play Boss Nass because it was bigger than life with a kind of bravado. So that's how he ended up in Star Wars in the first place.
I think this was after he did Tarzan too. Tarzan was 97, right?
Yeah.
It does make sense to have the guy who voices Clayton and also does the Tarzan yells to be Boss Nass more than to be Sio Bibble. But goddamn, George, these fucking names.
I have this joke format that I haven't really come up with an answer for it that I'm happy with. But the long and short of it is, like, George Lucas naming characters the dumbest shit you've ever heard. J.K. Rowling naming characters just a slur. Just Just a slur.
Giving Padme's entire family South Asian names when they are white. Pooja is especially egregious.
You know, I'm going to go ahead and say I don't feel qualified to talk about most of the very weird racial stuff in the Phantom Menace. We didn't even go into, like, the extremely odd shit happening with the Trade Federation. So I'm just not gonna. I'm too white to feel comfortable making
apparently they cycled through, like, a lot of various languages to figure out what accent the Moedians would have, and they landed on Thai.
I don't... You know, if you want them to be playing a space, therefore sea-faring empire, arm of an empire, wandering around, forcing other ports to follow their rules at gunpoint, man, have you heard of the British? Have you heard of the East India Trading Company, George?
Yeah, but we already had the British people as the bad guys in the original trilogy, so I can't use them again.
It's like poetry. It rhymes. Make it rhyme, George.
Apparently, depending on where the movie was released, they would have different accents. Like, there were some places where they had Italian accents or French accents.
Oh, yeah.
They have Italian accents in France and French accents in Italy.
Yeah.
Another bullet we absolutely dodged. Michael Jackson tried to get the role of Jar Jar.
No.
And George Lucas was like, no, he didn't want that at all.
Why?
Well, number one, he thought that Michael Jackson would compromise the character because it would be like, OMG, that's Michael Jackson. But also Michael Jackson wanted to wear prosthetic makeup, and George was really set on Jar Jar being CGI. So in this case, CGI is an extra good thing because, God, I would not have wanted to watch this movie if Michael Jackson was in it, even though Michael Jackson is dead.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about Michael Jackson, is what I've decided.
No. But speaking of what other fun could have been, okay, so Denzel Washington, Kyle MacLachlan, Morgan Freeman, Tom Hanks, Vin Diesel, and Kurt Russell were considered for the role of Qui-Gon before they cast Liam Neeson.
Wait, no Asians at all? God damn it, George.
I've really, part of me, since I'm Miss Oscar person, wanted to talk a little bit at least about how much the pod race scene borrows from Ben-Hur.
Yes!
Never seen Ben-Hur.
Chariot racing, that's all you need to know.
There's a very long chariot race sequence. But also, like, man, I don't really like talking about the pod racing sequence because it goes on for fucking ever. And, like, nothing really... It's very repetitive. I don't know. I don't like the pod race. I know that's what the entire, like, middle act of the movie is building towards. But, like, man... It's just kind of dull.
Yeah, apparently at one point it was 25 minutes long, and they cut it down to 9.
What?
Christ.
Oh.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
I do want to know, like, that one pod racer who has, like... my fondest memories of the Phantom Menace from when I was a 9-year-old are playing the pod racer game on the N64. That one pod racer who's, like, in a circle, in a bagel. How does he see?
Is there windows there?
Like,
he's an alien, don't worry about it.
You know what, fair.
There's a lot of don't worry about here.
Yeah, you know what, I will not worry about it. That's me, in my lane, focused, flourishing, thriving.
And apparently, Hugh Jackman, Joseph Fiennes, Kenneth Branagh, and Tim Roth were considered for Obi-Wan before Ewan McGregor got cast.
God, I can't imagine anybody but Ewan in this role.
Yeah. And then Kelly MacDonald and Bennett Robinson were in the running for Queen Amidala before Natalie Portman got cast. But Bennett would go on to play a pilot in Rise of Skywalker. And then Benicio del Toro was initially cast as Darth Maul, but he dropped out of the project because the director cut out most of his lines. And Benicio would actually go on to be...
Oh, don't remind me about Benicio del Toro in The Last Jedi.
I know.
You know, I'm just trying to imagine the flattening of acting, the unstoppable force of the Phantom Menace's flattening people's acting, meeting the immovable object of Kenneth Branagh's inability to play anything other than completely to the hilt.
You were right, Master. The negotiations were short. I don't know. That's my best Kenneth Branagh. I'm not Kyle.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. Imagine him out there giving the St. Crispin's Day speech to the Gungans. Top tier.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form? God. Obi-Wan, you're such a little shit.
I still think Obi-Wan's my favorite character in this movie.
Qui-Gon's a bit of like fast and loose with the rules as well, considering everything that goes on Tatooine.
Yeah.
I do like Qui-Gon a lot as a character on paper, because like I like the idea of a Jedi who is powerful enough to be like a Yoda level master, but also is like, these rules kind of suck. Get fucked.
And
I'm gonna do what I want. What are you gonna do? Kick me out of the order? I dare you.
And he was also the only one who like kind of realized that Padme wasn't the handmaid and she was actually the queen. They had that little fun exchange in like the I think it was the ship, or maybe it was when
it was outside the shop. She was like, "The queen will not approve." It's like, "The queen trusts my judgment." Well, I don't approve.
I kind of like to think that this is like the kind of dynamic that Obi-Wan and Leia would have had.
Yeah. And also the moment where Padme, like, looks into the camera after Anakin reveals that he's never finished a race, that is the look of somebody who wants to fucking murder Qui-Gon Jinn.
I will say, watching it this time with an eye towards, like, okay, I know that Padme isn't Padme in a lot of scenes, or isn't the queen isn't the queen in a lot of scenes. I really like, there's like one kind of brief moment where the queen, the fake queen, basically turns to one of her handmaidens, Padme, and says like, what do you think about going off planet? Basically like, okay, you've got to actually make this decision, but you got to do it in a way that doesn't implicate you as being the queen. I think she says, like, "We are brave, Your Highness," or something like that.
Yeah, that was very close to being what went under my tattoo. I have on the inside of my left wrist Naboo's royal insignia with the words "I will not defer" underneath it.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
But it was very nearly "We are brave, Your Highness."
I'm going to go ahead and, in the most hypocritical comment of the evening, nerd.
Takes one to know one.
I would never get a tattoo based on a piece of media that I love.
Tell me about your Lord of the Rings obsession again.
Goodbye. I'll send you my plugs when I get that.
Also, apparently, like, speaking of Padme, the final battle would have been slightly different because Padme would have been with Anakin in a 2-seat starfighter against the Trade Federation control ship, like Eowyn and Mary, I think. I'm not sure how that would have played out, but what do you think?
I think it was better that Padme was on the ground. She needed to have that last confrontation with Gonray, and that now we will discuss a new treaty. Because even if the line read isn't badass, the moment is still kind of, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Girl boss.
Girl boss.
So apparently there's something about like comparing the prequel trilogy to a Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
But because it's not told in order, because it's like, well, technically the Phantom Menace is supposed to be the opening act of a Greek tragedy, and wait, what was that I had about the music? The parade music at the end of the scene. Like, you put a minor chord on it, slow it way down, and then replace
the Imperial March.
Choir. Yes, exactly. And then consider, like, how, like, you could have easily imagined the kids in the Phantom Menace growing up to be the people in the Battle of Endor. It's like some really chilling implications.
On which side? That's expanded universe bullshit that we won't get into. Naboo was in an awkward position, but there's, like, comic material of Leia teaming up with one of the queens of Naboo to run some interference, which is cool.
And then,
that is cool.
I think she actually teams up with Pooja at one point.
I think that got tossed out. Padme's nieces have been basically relegated into ash.
Yeah.
These aren't the nieces you're looking for.
I am always a little hesitant about analyses like that. It's like the Batman v Superman is actually a 5-act Greek tragedy or whatever. Like, I get where people are coming from on it, but it always feels like, I don't know, writing in reverse, as I've said. Like,
Anakin in 2 and 3 especially does have a lot of Greek myth energy about him. He's got the whole prophecy thing. Oh god, we didn't really even touch on the whole the prophecy.
Oh yeah, the one that Qui-Gon said he's the chosen one who will help fight against the Sith or bring balance to the Force. I think that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and everybody who got mad about the midichlorians of it all, my coping mechanism for the midichlorians is that the Jedi actually don't understand them that well, and really what it is that if you are strong in the Force, the midichlorians will show up to om nom nom on you, as opposed to because there are midichlorians in you, the Force is strong with you.
I think that would be a reasonably good thing to retcon into it. Midichlorians have been talked to death. The prophecy has been talked to death. You're right that it's not actually a first draft, but they're also stuff that, like, the twin demons of lazy writing, in my opinion, especially lazy fantasy or sci-fi writing, are fate and destiny. Unless it's very hard for you to do a story in a way that makes me feel like fate is a reasonable thing to just write into your plot. And usually when I do, it's like Kung Fu Hustle. I don't know. I feel like the prophecy is such a weak writing moment. I feel like if George Lucas wasn't George Lucas at this point, someone would have been like, don't do that, man.
He did kind of write himself into a corner in that, well, I've killed off Qui-Gon, and now there's really nobody in the Order who wants Anakin to be there. So I've got to come up with a new reason for Anakin to be there, because I've already written that Anakin was a Jedi.
Mm-hmm. And then Obi-Wan ends up taking him because he's indebted to his master. He's trying to fulfill Qui-Gon's final wish, even though he is grieving himself, and isn't that a recipe for tragedy?
You gave a 25-year-old with anxiety a 9-year-old with abandonment issues. Great job, Yoda.
They need therapy! They need therapy so much!
Like, I don't understand why they had to stick Anakin with Obi-Wan right that second. Like, they could have given him some time with the other younglings to let him make friends, but that's shit for comics. And
wasn't it said in extra material that Anakin didn't get along with the younglings, and he was kind of also isolated, and then because of that, Obi-Wan was the only one he could really have a connection with?
Yeah, but like, it would have made sense if, like, you know, we'd put Anakin with the other younglings first, and then it was clear that it wasn't really working out, so I guess we'll just give him to Obi-Wan. I don't know. I feel like this was kind of a thing that the Acolyte handled really well, in that Osha had literally lost everybody, so, like, Sol was the only person she had, and it kind of made sense in that respect, because she'd also kind of bonded with him.
Mm-hmm.
We talked more about the Acolyte than I expected, but, like, with the whole angle of the Virgins and whatnot, because that gets brought up here.
I have a lot of issues with how the Jedi Order gets portrayed in the prequels. A lot of them boil down to, like, they are a lot more rigid and formalized than my brain kind of, like, thought when I was a kid. When I was a kid, and I still think it would be better, I didn't think Yoda would be, like, living with the Jedi Council on a city planet. I figured he lived on Dagobah. He was a guru who you had to go seek. The portrayal of the Jedi Council, of the Jedi in the prequels, is a really kind of irritating subject to me.
I think that's the greatest fault of both the prequels and the sequels, is that no matter how good or bad they are, they're always at a disadvantage because they were never going to live up to what you had in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. Like, I had all these ideas in my head about what the Jedi Order would mean and how it would work, and they were so totally wrong with what it did. And honestly, it took until, like, the third movie and I really grokked, oh, the Jedi Order are idiots, to realize what George was doing with it. And I still don't think it totally works. But so, like, it's a sore subject for me, but it's also not one that I can really justify. He didn't do the thing I would do is not a cogent criticism.
And that's what fanfiction's for.
I thought it was for making Lena and Kara kiss.
There's a little fun thing that I found. When Anakin is piloting his starfighter to join the fight at the droid control ship, like, R2 beeps at him, and when it's deciphered, it reads out as, "Anakin, turn the ship around and go back Comey right away." But I'm assuming that homie is a typo.
I mean, it's adorable, whatever it is. Like, 3PO might be Anakin's kid, but Anakin is R2's kid. R2 took one look at this kid and he's like, mine.
Yes.
I claim him. He's mine. R2 rolling up to Padme like, I found this grubby little child. Can I keep him? And also, I love the moment of Anakin being like, Qui-Gon told me to stay in the ship, so I'm gonna stay in the ship.
Stay in the ship. And technically he does stay in the ship, but he doesn't say the ship had to stay there.
That's how you know Anakin would have been a great student for Qui-Gon.
Yes.
Either that or he would have turned Qui-Gon into Obi-Wan.
Someone write away where Qui-Gon lives and Anakin's his student. Because, I don't know, Obi-Wan and, Anakin being students again, under Qui-Gon. I imagine the shenanigans.
Oh, God, the shenaniganery. But that's a story for another day, so I think the time has come to ask, is the Force with it?
I'm saying no. Even with all the plot stuff, this is cultural appropriation and Orientalism of it all, the movie. It's uncomfortable in many aspects for me.
That is absolutely valid. Ellie?
I want to say only a Sith deals in absolutes.
God damn it!
I think you'll... No, hold on, I'm not done. That sentence was not done yet. But I feel like you'll force choke me from 200 miles away if I do that. And B, too much of this is me wishing the movie were better, is imagining the themes that I can eventually tease out of the whole trilogy onto this film. No, I don't think the Force is with it.
I can't deny what you guys have said about the very real problems that it has, but I don't know. For me, this is... Oh, God damn it, I can't deny. It's fucking Padme. You put Padme in a movie, and I'm just endlessly captivated by her. For her and for her alone, I have to say the Force is with it. I am a simple creature, and now you know my weakness. I would
also betray your ancient monastic order if it meant getting to kiss Natalie Portman.
Yeah, I would.
You know the video.
I would 100%. Mm-hmm. I would 100% leave the Jedi Order to get married to Natalie Portman.
I don't blame either of you.
I mean, I do it for Padme. I don't want to put that on Natalie Portman for multiple reasons.
Yeah. Obviously, the character we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Who has Pluggables?
As always, I am Ellie McConaughey. I am, as mentioned briefly across this episode, the host of The Biggest Night in Podcasting. We choose a randomly selected Oscar-winning movie, and we chat about it. Our lovely host is on there multiple times, including on an upcoming episode. You can also find me on Tumblr at Football in Tuxedos, and on Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Medium, no longer Twitter, at LSR42. This is not a bit that I'm putting on for this podcast. I am legitimately just like this, so follow with caution.
And you can find me on the online news on Tumblr. I do the title cards and the icons for both 6 Degrees of Star Wars and our sister podcast, In Each Retelling. So if you like my work, you can come in over and commission me.
Awesome!
One last thing. If you want to see Ahmed Best in a better Star Wars role, check out his episode of The Mandalorian where he plays Kelleran Beck.
And also watch Jedi Temple Challenge or whatever it's called, where the character originated.
Mm-hmm.
And in the spirit of Star Wars, to be there for the people who need us, this episode's mutual fund spotlight goes to A Mall for Women, raising money to provide shelter and crucial supplies for Sudanese women who have been displaced by civil war in their homeland. The GoFundMe link can be found in the description for this podcast, as well as on my various socials under my new handle, Demisem. Our theme music is provided by Refractory Period, the 2 girls, 1 beat synth pop sensation. You can follow them on Instagram at Refractory Period, the band. To further support this podcast, please subscribe to us on your platform of choice, leave reviews, and share with your friends to boost our visibility, and consider joining our Patreon. And now, it's time to turn to the Chance Cube to decide where our journey takes us next.
Shami, you are the only remaining knight of the Order of 6 Degrees of Star Wars who has not used their attempt to force the Chance Cube. Would you like to do that for our very special holiday episode? Or will you leave it up to chance?
I'll leave it up to chance.
All right.
Is that 3? 3!
Hell yeah.
Listeners, that sigh of relief you hear is everybody in my cast knowing that they don't have to watch the holiday special again.
Oh.
Because it's a 3, which means our holiday episode is going to be Bridget Jones' Diary.
Oh my god!
That noise you hear, audience, that is me tapping the mat already. I'm out. I'm done. Bye.
We're already 2! It's a double feature!
Oh my god! We will see you all at the solstice to cover Bridget Jones's Diary. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, stay beautiful, and may the Force be with you.